Hello my friends, thank you for joining me. This will be the first video in potentially a series of videos where I will be, in essence, giving you a lesson on biology in ASMR. I am by no means a teacher, but what I am is, hopefully by the time most people see this, a full-fledged biologist. So, sit back, relax, and listen to biology in ASMR style. Alright, this is going to be the book from OpenStax right here. Biology Edition 2, Edition 2. And you can go, you search this, OpenStax on line, and you can find this edition for free. So this is nothing that is not like I am copyrighting anything. This is for free. Anyone can go download it anytime. So let's just begin with Chapter 1. I will read sometimes and I will explain sometimes, because I know that a lot of times teachers and tutors don't do a very good job explaining, so I will try my best to explain more than actually read. Alright, well, what is biology? In simple terms, biology is study of life, and essentially what it means is biology is study of life, how things live, how things interact, how the processes in a living body or living cell works, how organisms change, etc., etc. It encompasses all of this. There's a lot of subgroups like microbiology, genetics, and some other things like taxonomy. All of this falls under biology. So biology is simply something that encompasses everything. You will quickly realize how many aspects of biology we discuss every day. For example, recent news, blah blah blah. Here, on a global scale, many researchers are committed to finding ways to protect the planet, solve environmental issues, and reduce the effects of climate change. All of these diverse endeavors are related to different facets of the discipline of biology. And if it sounds like I haven't read this yet, it's because it's true. Now, first off, biology is science, but what is science? We can define science as knowledge that covers general truth or the operation of general laws. And yes, science is quite simply means knowledge. If you can find out about it, then it's science. The scientific method is a method of research with defined steps that include experiments and careful observation. The scientific method has several steps to it. And it's all about, it can be a little complicated, but it's all about setting up experiments that have controls and making them consistent and repeatable. If you can test it, repeat it, and it's consistent, then it can be considered a scientific endeavor. A hypothesis is a suggested explanation of an event, which one can test. In essence, a hypothesis is an idea. It's an unproven idea. Like, for instance, if I were to say, the moon is made out of cheese, that would be an unproven idea, and the way to prove that would be to go to the moon and find out. A theory, on the other hand, is a tested and confirmed explanation for observations or phenomena. Simply, what that means is that if the hypothesis is true, then it's a theory. What would you expect to see in a museum of natural science? Frogs, plants, dinosaur skeletons? Exhibits about how the brain functions, blah blah blah. Science includes such diverse fields as astronomy, biology, computer science, geology, logic, physics, chemistry, and mathematics. However, scientists consider those fields of science related to the physical world and its phenomena and processes natural science. Thus, a museum of natural science might contain any of the items listed below. What that basically means is that if it's part of the natural world in any way, shape, or form, it's a natural science. There is no complete agreement when it comes to defining what the natural sciences include. However, for some experts, the natural sciences are astronomy, biology, chemistry, earth science, and physics. Other scholars choose to divide natural science into life sciences, which say living things, and physical science, which say non-living matter, like astronomy, geology, physics, chemistry, and I would also include mathematics, and technically mathematics is also not living. And I'm sure many people will learn this quickly, is that anything is alive if it is organic and alive if if it's based on carbon and hydrogen. That's what organic chemistry is, for instance. Organic chemistry means living chemistry, chemistry that is that involves things that are living. If it has carbon and hydrogen, and a lot of times nitrogen as well, then it's considered organic and living. Some include nitrogen, some don't. So, and then here we go. Scientific reasoning, inductive reasoning. Scientific reasoning, of course, includes two types of logical thinkings: inductive and deductive. Inductive reasoning is a form of logical thinking that uses related observations to arrive to a general conclusion. And deductive reasoning is a form of logical thinking that uses a general principle or law to forecast specific results. Now, what exactly does that mean? It's kind of confusing. Well, let's consider an example here. If you were to... Inductive reasoning would be, alright, you see a wounded animal, and you see a wounded wildebeest, and you see hyenas coming up and basically maul the wildebeest. You induct that, well, the hyenas are mauling the wildebeest because they're hungry. That's inductive. Deductive reasoning would be, you see a wounded wildebeest and you see hyenas. You know from your experience that the hyenas will probably maul the wildebeest. In essence, inductive is basically what happens before the fact, and deductive would be what happens after the fact. Inductive is more learning, and deductive is applying what you've learned. So that's basically the difference. Okay, both types of logical thinkings are related to the two main pathways of scientific study: descriptive science and hypothesis-based science. Descriptive, or discovery science, which is usually inductive, aims to observe, explore, and discover, while hypothesis-based science, which is usually deductive, begins with a specific question or problem and a potential answer or solution that one can test. And similar to what I said earlier, descriptive science would be like you observe, like what a lot of astronomers do. You observe what's happening and then you record what you see and try to explain it. And then hypothesis-based science, that you come up with an idea and you try to figure out if it's true or not. That's basically the two differences. Biology, most of the time it's hypothesis-based science, at least in my experience. And now we get into the scientific method, which, believe it or not, is simple, but it's hard to explain unless it's right in front of me, if you know what I mean. Because generally, the way I learned it is there's a set list of things you do, and then you repeat certain lists if things aren't met. I'm going to see. Okay, good, so we do have a list. Alright. Now, recall that a hypothesis is basically an idea that one tests. Well, first off, a hypothesis has to be testable. In other words, you have to be able to test it. You can't say, well, when we're all sleeping, your Wii games... No, I guess you can't test that. One thing would be, like, your Wii game discs have an invisible, immaterial, city living inside them. Well, there's no real way to test that because you can't see it, you can't touch it, etc. You can't measure it, etc. So it has to be testable. It also has to be falsifiable, as this thing says right here. And what does that mean? Well, it has to be able to be proven false. Similar to my example, you can't say that there's an invisible, untouchable city in it. How would you prove that's false? The answer is you can't. Anyway, a variable is any part of the experiment that can vary or change during the experiment. Basically what that means is if something, as it says, if something can change, then it's a variable. Like, for instance, if you're testing the flight patterns of flies in your containment, the temperature would be a variable because that could easily change the flight speed of the flies. As you know, as many know, insects move quickly or slowly based on temperature. So the temperature, even a slight difference, will be a variable. The control group contains every feature of the experiment group, except it is not given to manipulate the results of the hypothesis. For the fly experiment, like I just said, you would keep it at room temperature, while for the other ones, you would set variables, make the containments colder, make them warmer to see how the flies are affected by the temperature. And then you would test how how the test group reacts compared to the control group. Alright. Oh, forgive me. Had a little bit of a coughing fit off camera, so we'll ignore that. Alright. And here is the list. For the scientific method. First, make an observation. That generally means you see something that can catch your interest. You ask a question like, does this, like, it's basically ask a question, try to give a explanation as to what you're seeing and why. Then form a hypothesis, which would be an idea. Then make a prediction based on hypothesis. A lot of times when we make a hypothesis, we predict through deductive reasoning how it's going to unfold. Like, for instance, with the flies, I noticed that the flies fly and they seem to change their speed based on the temperature of the house. So my hypothesis is the temperature affects their flight speed, and my prediction would be, well, warm air makes them fly faster, and therefore cold air makes them fly slower. Then do an experiment, test a prediction. That would be put them in a container. The control group being room temperature, and the other group being, one that's 2 degrees warmer, 4 degrees warmer, 10 degrees warmer, 2 degrees cooler, 10 degrees cooler. You get the idea. And then analyze the results. If the hypothesis is supported, it would be you report the results. It could become a theory. Who knows? And if it's not supported, then you either report the results, and if need be, you try again to figure out why your prediction was wrong. A lot of times you don't have to do it because, like, if my prediction for the flies was, well, cold air would make them fly faster, and if it's not right, well, then I know that cold air makes them fly slower. Then all you have to do you do other experiments to figure out why that is. But in essence, you could pretty much use deductive reasoning to consider, well, that's just, if cold air makes them slower, warm air makes them faster. Essentially, that's what that is. And here, it gives probably a better explanation than what I gave. Observation: is there something wrong with my electrical outlet? Question: if something is wrong with the outlet, my coffee maker won't work when plugged into it. That would be deductive reasoning. 3. Hypothesis: my toaster doesn't toast my bread. 4. Prediction: I plug my coffee maker into the outlet. 5. Experiment: my coffee maker works. 6. Why doesn't my toaster work? And in essence, you will guess that, no, it's not the outlet, it's the toaster. Alright, and now we get to two other types of sciences. Alright, the scientific community has been debating for the last few decades about the value of different types of science. It is valuable to pursue science for the sake of simply gaining knowledge, or the scientific knowledge only have worth if we can apply it to solving a specific problem or to bettering our lives. Basic science or pure science seeks to expand knowledge regardless of the short-term applications of that knowledge, while applied science, or technology, if you will, aims to use science to solve real-world problems. A lot of times, your sciences, while can be applied, some of them aren't. For instance, I honestly wanted to be an astronomer when I was younger, but my big issue was I couldn't figure out what astronomy could be used for, and I still to this day can't figure out what it's used for. In practicality, I find astronomy very fascinating. I read it whenever I can, but I don't see how it affects our lives on Earth, and it really doesn't. As opposed to applied science, which biology does, through biology, which you can get numerous things such as vaccinations. In fact, in essence, or medicines, when I eventually get my doctorate in biology, I will be pursuing a specialty in viruses, and hopefully making vaccines or potentially medicines for viruses. So basically, that's what that is. If you're searching for just knowledge's sake, it's a basic science. But if you're trying to use it for some kind of technology, it'd be applied science. And yes, people think of technology as electronic. Not always. Technically, vaccines are technology. While scientists usually carefully plan research efforts in both basic and applied science, note that some discoveries are made with serendipity, that is, by means of a fortunate accident or a lucky surprise, such as penicillin. Some guy was experimenting with. It says it right here. Yeah, some guy was experimenting with something, and he accidentally created penicillin. And honestly, that's actually pretty cool that we can discover things by accident. Just really great. Now, of course, all scientific discoveries are verified through peer-reviewed manuscripts. Now, what does that mean? It basically means a bunch of scientists who are in the same field or a very similar field will read your results and sometimes even repeat your experiment to see the validity. And if the peers say that it's acceptable, then it's considered a theory, and we move on from there. So that's basically what all this is saying. The scientific paper consists of several specific sections, for which this particular I know because I read a lot of them. You have the introduction, the materials and methods, results and discussions. And holy crap, I've had to write a couple of those in school. So honestly, not that hard if you know what you're doing. You just have to, just pay attention. The structure is called the IMRAD, which I've actually never heard it put like that. Okay. They are usually acknowledgement, a reference section, as well as an abstract or concise summary at the beginning of the paper. Consider the abstract like the summary of a movie. This is a summary of what you're going to read in the paper. You can get the gist. You don't get the details, but you will get the gist of it. And you've seen it before on IMDb. You can read the summary and at least get the basic story of the movie, but you don't really get the details of the movie unless you watch the whole thing. Like, compare the summary of Avengers Endgame to the actual movie. You get the gist, but you won't get the you will not get the all the details of the movie. And here we will discuss the parts of the scientific paper. The introduction starts with a brief but broad background information for what is known as in the field. Yeah, this is similar to the abstract. The only difference is that instead of talking about the experiment, it talks about the things we know about the field. Like, for instance, if I were to write a paper on types of flies for fly racing, for instance, something out there, my abstract would talk about the experiment like, I do this, and eventually this happened. I put the flies into a slalom container, and at the end, 5 flies make it under a minute. The introduction will say, we know from certain experiments that temperature can affect it. So we experimented with different species of flies, and then different temperatures. That's basically the difference. Then, of course, using the work of ideas of others without proper citation is plagiarism. That goes without saying. If you copy off somebody and don't cite that work, it's plagiarism. They do not take kindly to that. Most of the time, when you hear about plagiarism, it's generally by accident, but still, you don't want to do it. The material and method section includes a complete and accurate description and substances of the research used. This is by far the longest section, and what this does is it goes detail by detail what you did, and I mean detail by detail. Like, for instance, if I was doing my flies, I would go through every single individual fly. I would go through how long the course is. I would go through what temperatures I'm using. I would go through the variables in time. I would go through each trial. I would go through each differences in the trial. I would go through me calculating every single average and then putting the means in, like if I do 3 trials. I would go through what methods and steps I use to determine the averages for all 3 trials. All of that is in the material and method section, and very often is by far the longest section of said paper. The results section simply narrates the findings without any further interpretation. What that basically means is here are the results. Generally, this is a short section, and often I have seen it where it's not even separated. It's simply part of materials and methods. It's simply the end of the materials and methods section. In the discussion section, this is what is used to interpret the results. So you read the results, and it's like, and here's the discussion. What do these results mean? And then the conclusion will basically be a summarize of what happened and what it means. Like, for instance, which fly made it to the end? Why did this fly make it to the end? Did the temperature make a difference? Etc. And then review articles do not follow the IMRAD format because they do not present original scientific findings. This is basically a review article. Think of it like in journalism. A scientific paper would be a reporter, while a review article would be a columnist. A columnist will take data and interpret it for the masses to easily understand, while the reporter would be the one actually going into the field and getting the information in the first place. So consider it like that: scientific paper, reporter, and review article, columnist. Alright, now we're going to do themes and concepts of biology. And this is a fairly short chapter, I think. Yeah, and then after this we will stop because we'll be in chapter 2. Alright, let's see here. Biology is the science of studied life, but what exactly is life? This may sound like a silly question with an obvious answer, but it's not always easy to define life. For instance, a branch of biology is called virology, which, by the way, will be my specialty, hopefully. Fingers crossed. Which studies viruses, which exhibit some of the characteristics of living entities but lack others. Although viruses can attack living organisms, cause disease, and even reproduce, they do not meet the criteria that biology used to define life. Consequently, virologists are not biologists, strictly speaking, which, that's kind of splitting hairs. You have to go into biology to be a virologist. So, but, Alright, well, the properties of life. All living organisms share several key characteristics: order, sensitivity, which means responses to the environment, reproduction, adaptation, growth, and development. Growth and development, same thing, sorry. Regulation / homeostasis, stasis, same thing. Energy processing and evolution. When viewed together, these 8 characteristics serve to define life. So let's go over them. Order. Organisms are highly organized, coordinated structures that consist of one or more cells. What this basically means is if the cell is not just random mishmash of stuff and has order to it, seems to have some kind of clear goal, then it can be considered life. For instance, a cup of water, while it may have certain chemicals in it, it may have hydrogen, oxygen, it's not alive because there's no order to it. It's just stuff. It follows the laws of physics, but it's not ordered. You can spill it on a table, won't do anything. So that's basically what that is. And chemical, same thing. If you had a cup of liquid, a chemical that has carbon, nitrogen, and hydrogen, you put it into a cup, it's not going to do anything. It's just there. Like I said, the laws of physics are keeping the atoms together, but that's about it. There's no order to it. So, sensitivity or response to stimuli. What this basically means is, generally the common one is light. Does it react to light? Stimuli, light for instance. If I were to put light up to a protist, which is a type of a creature, it will react to it. Some will go towards the light, some will go away from the light. It's responding to the light. If I put a light to the cup of water, it's not going to do anything to it. It'll heat it up, maybe, but it won't react to it in a way that life should. Another way is if I were to poke at certain microscopic creatures, it will react to it. It may go away from the object. It may try to attack the object, or it might even try to climb the object. It's reacting to that stimuli, which in this case would be a touch type of stimuli, as opposed to a cup of water. The atoms might attach to it, but it's not doing it because that's in its biology. It's doing it because that follows the laws of physics. It doesn't decide to do it. It can't run away from it. It just does what it does. and that's the big difference. That's the big difference between life and non-life. Life will always respond to some kind of stimuli. For instance, you are alive because you responded to watching this video. As I'm speaking, your mind is going through what I'm saying. That's a stimuli. Reproduction. Basically what that means is, can it reproduce? Single-cell organisms reproduce by first duplicating their DNA. Can it do it on its own, basically? Whether it be sexually or asexually. Sexually simply means that it will get with another partner and create an offspring through gametes, which is sex cells. Males have sperm sex cells or pollen, and females have eggs or seeds. And asexually, with that simply means, can it, like bacteria, can it reproduce with itself? Very often making a copy. Viruses cannot do this because it needs a host. It cannot do it on its own. It cannot do it with another virus. It has to have a host. A virus basically hijacks a host DNA and creates more of itself. That's why that's not considered life. Oh, and when it comes to response to stimuli, it's a little hard to explain, but viruses don't do that either. They more or less do what they do because that's just what they do due to the laws of physics. They don't do what they do because they are responding to anything. In order, well, they are ordered. Okay, we did 1, 2, 3, 4. Adaptation. All living organisms exhibit a fit to their environment. In other words, can they adapt to their surroundings? I'll give you an example. When I fish, I'm a fisherman, so I know this happens. Fish in the 1990s, I think Texas banned the use of rubber worms because the fish were falling for it too often, and we were losing population of bass. However, at a certain point, the bass no longer cared for the rubber worms because they adapted. They learned that the rubber worms are fake, and so they responded accordingly and did not, and no longer attack the worms. Bacteria do this too. They will, if you use antibacterial medicine, antibiotic medicine, they will very often adapt to medicine, and then medicine no longer works. Viruses, on the other hand, they do kind of do this, but it's in a little different ways I'm not going to get into because viruses are a little more complicated than other things. Growth and development. Organisms grow and develop as a result of genes providing specific instructions that would direct cellular growth and development. Obviously, this one's fairly simple with animals specifically. When you give birth, they are babies and they grow up to adults. Humans as well. So, does it do that? Most creatures do. All living creatures do. Bacteria do this. Some bacteria do this instantly, while creatures like us do it very slowly comparatively. Viruses do not, in that sense. Regulation and homeostasis. Even the smallest organisms are complex and require multiple regulatory mechanisms to coordinate internal functions. We do this. Our heartbeats are constant. Our body temperature is constant. Same thing with animals. That's the same. The polar bear does a great job of keeping itself warm when it needs to. Bacteria does this as well. In fact, bacteria, the way they do it is also pretty complicated. The cell, for that matter, does it. The cell is technically a living thing. When we get to it, how the cell operates itself is fascinating. Viruses, they do, in a way. Again, it's really hard to explain. I'm hoping we get to that here. I'm hoping we get to that eventually, but we'll see how far we will see how far this video series takes me. Alright, homeostasis is simply, literally steady state. What that simply means is, regardless of external factors, an organism's internal factors are constant. For instance, when we are cold, for humans, for instance, when we're cold, our bodies do their best to keep ourselves at constant temperature. If you would take your temperature out in a cold day, it would still be relatively the same, and that's what homeostasis is. I think it's a little more complicated because I know reptiles and amphibians do not do that in the same way. Like reptiles, fish, and amphibians are cold-blooded, and I don't know if that's necessarily considered homeostasis. All right, energy processing. This one's pretty simple. Can it take in and process energy? Does it eat in a way? Like for instance, humans eat, they consume food. We will get, like, those are called autotrophs, heterotrophs. Can it feed itself? That would be autotrophs, like plants. Those are specifically photoautotrophs, which means that it can use sunlight, photosynthesis, to eat. A lot of things are heterotrophs, which means that they eat other things. Bacteria do this, and humans do this. So if it eats, it's alive. Viruses do not eat. Evolution. The diversity of life on Earth is a result of mutations or random changes in hereditary material over time. What that basically means is, can something that's living change over time? For creatures, it's fairly obvious. You have wolves eventually turn into the several hundred useless dog breeds we have today. Bacteria are constantly changing. You get the idea. Viruses do change in this way; they do evolve, but again, viruses do not fall into all this criteria. And then, of course, many chemicals don't. Like, chemicals do evolve, but they do not, and they do not react to stimuli, and they do not process energy. You get the idea. Alright, and then there are levels of organizations of living things. You have the atom, which is the smallest and most fundamental unit of matter. Every single bit of matter that we can touch and see is made of atoms. That's the smallest thing. That in essence is the smallest thing. I know some people will say, well, we have quarks and stuff, but we'll keep it simple here. We have the atom. It's the smallest thing. For like water is made up of 2 hydrogen atoms and 1 oxygen atom. Then we have a molecule, which is a chemical structure consisting of at least 2 atoms held together by 1 or more chemical bonds. Like I said, one molecule of water is 2 hydrogen and 1 oxygen. Think of it as an equation. 2H plus 1O equals 1 molecule of water. And then many molecules that are biologically important are macromolecules, which are large molecules formed by polymerizations. An example would be DNA. Another example would be your amino acids, your nucleotides. All of these are macromolecules, and we'll get to those when we get to those. And here's the double helix DNA right here. Then we move on to organelles. Organelles are small structures that exist within cells. Have you heard of the meme, the mitochondria is the power plant of the cell? Well, mitochondria is an organelle. Basically, an organelle is an organ within a cell. You have your cell, which is in essence the atom of living things. Your cell is the smallest thing. Like, you have skin cells, that is the smallest living thing. And your organelles are the organs inside those smallest living things. Then you have the cell itself, which I just discussed. The cell is the smallest fundamental unit of life. The cell is the smallest thing that's actually alive. The atom is the smallest thing that physically exists, and the cell is the smallest thing that physically exists that is considered alive, since it meets all criteria of life. So that's what that is. So to recap, the cell consists of its own organelles, which are made up of macromolecules, which are made up of molecules, which themselves are made up of atoms. Okay, then scientists have classified cells as prokaryotic and eukaryotic. Prokaryotes are single-celled or colonial, which means cells are combined, organisms that do not have membrane-bound nuclei. In contrast, the cells of eukaryotes do have membrane-bound organelles and have membrane-bound nucleuses. We will get to this in more detail later, but what that basically means is the prokaryotes do not have organelles, and their nuclei move around and shift within their cytoplasm. Eukaryotes, on the other hand, do have organelles like the mitochondria and the chloroplast, and their nuclei is stationary within their own cytoplasm. Then in larger organisms, we have cells that combine we have the smallest unit of cells. When you combine them, they make a tissue, which are groups of similar cells that carry out similar functions. They combine to make an organ. So basically, with an organ like with a heart, you have heart tissue, which are made up of its own special cells, which themselves have organelles. You get the idea. So organs are made up of tissues, which are made up of cells, specific cells. A heart is made up of heart tissue, which is made out of heart cells. Then we have an organ system, or a higher level organization that consists of functionally related organs. For instance, circulatory system transports blood through the body to and from the lungs. Another example would be digestive system. Our teeth, which chew the food, our tongues, which help guide saliva and the food down the gullet, our throats and esophaguses bring the food down to the stomach to digest it, our intestines separate the nutrients. That's an organ system. All organs working together. Technically, the arteries are not technically part of the system because that does not really affect the digestion. Then organism is all that combined. All your systems combined as an organism. Like for instance, my digestive, my circulatory, my nervous system, etc., all combined to make me an organism. And this bacteria, it's mitochondria. Sorry, not bacteria. Bacteria. It's ribosomes, it's RNA, it's DNA, all combined to make that organism. Then biologists collectively call all of the individuals within a living species in a specific area a population. For instance, frogs in the Amazon is a population, while frogs out in North America would not be considered a part of that population. A community is a sum of populations inhabiting a particular area. So a community would be in the Amazon would be the frogs, the mosquitoes, the panthers. I guess that's I guess it's the cat of the Amazon. The tribespeople, the bacteria. All that is the community of the Amazon. The community of the North American land does not count to the community. An ecosystem consists of all the living things in a particular area together with the abiotic, non-living parts of that environment, such as nitrogen in the soil and rainwater. Basically, in the Amazon, that includes the rain, that includes the carbon gas, that includes the oxygen gas, that includes the ozone gas, that includes the light, that includes literally every physical thing inside the Amazon. And then the biosphere is a collection of all ecosystems. So outside the Amazon is the biosphere. That would be included with North America and India and Russia and Antarctica. Everything on this planet is a biosphere, while Mars will have its own biosphere. And right here is how it goes. From organelles, which are inside cells, which make up tissues, which combine to make up organs and organ systems, which all of that combined are your organisms, which will combine to make population communities. All that combined is the ecosystem, and all of that is contained in the biosphere. Often, ecosystem and biosphere are the same thing. Of course, that simply means like ecosystem is like on the land here. That's not considered like the atmosphere. Like the mesosphere is not considered part of the ecosystem. Alright. Diversity of life. The fact that biology as science has such a broad scope has to do with the tremendous diversity of life on Earth. The source of this diversity is evolution. And let's see here. Evolutionary biologists study the evolution of living things in everything from the microscopic world to ecosystems. Alright, here we go. Now, according to the Tree of Life, which in essence shows how similar organisms are to each other. For instance, over here, the closer each branch is, the more similar the creatures are. Supposedly, all this can be traced back to one single living organism. That would be considered abiogenesis, and that's not exactly something I deal with, so we will not even be discussing that. Alright. But yeah, it's separated into three big branches. You have your bacteria, which are single-celled organisms that are prokaryotes. You have your archaea, which are very similar to bacteria. The only difference is that they are found in they're found in very harsh environments, like your some are halo. I don't know the term because Archaea is not my level of study. It's like there's thermophiles. Like that. Yeah, thermophiles are ones that are found in extreme temperature. Halophiles are found in extreme salt content, and mesophiles are found in like places with high concentration of methane. I think there are others too. I just can't think of them on the top of my head. And humans are here an animal, really close to fungi and plants, and then a bunch of protists here. And protists are very interesting. We'll get to those if Lord willing, or the viewers willing as well. We'll see. All right, branches of biological study, and here's where I can give you where I am. There are several branches. For instance, microbiology, which is where I am, and biochemistry are biological studies, but they are different. For instance, microbiology focuses on studying living creatures on a microscopic level, while biochemistry are studying things like nutrition, studying how chemicals work inside a living organism. So, like, as a microbiologist, I study how viruses affect people. Biochemists may study how a medicine affects the inside of a body, or how fried foods affect your gallbladder, that kind of stuff. Neurobiology would be the study of how the brain works. Paleontology, which technically is biology because they were once living things, would be a study of extinct fossilized creatures. My mistake. Zoology and botany. Zoology would be the study of animals specifically, or botany, study of plants specifically. And zoology and botany can have sub-studies such as taxonomy, which would be the study of naming and categorizing creatures. And biology is a culmination of the achievements of natural sciences from their inception to today. And here are the key terms. If you want to go over those, we can. Let me know in the comments down below if you guys want me to go over these briefly so I can explain them a little better. Who knows? Maybe next video you guys want me to come up here and discuss something that didn't quite make sense. I can probably do a little better job of explaining it. And here's a summary. And then next video, I can also go through the quiz, and I can also go through the quiz, the review questions you want me to. Let me know in the comments down below, as this is literally my first video. And next time, if you guys are interested, we'll go through Chapter 2, or at least on how big is this? Okay, we'll do part of Chapter 2, probably Chapter 2.1, which will be the chemical foundation of life. So, I hope you had fun. Well, I just want to thank you all for watching this. So again, if you guys like this video, please subscribe to the channel and and hit the like button, as that helps the video a lot. Please let me know in the comments down below if you want me to continue on this type of videos. I don't know how useful these will be to people. Maybe they'll find it incredibly boring, but maybe you guys find it relaxing to hear me teach you a little bit about biology as you try to relax. So I just want to thank you all very much for watching this video. Have a great day, and God bless.